pour le bien. Le monde a fini. Si nous pas changer de conception, n'empêcher d'en faire méchanceté, détourner bon cerveau, pays non pas marcher.
Yo bouche ma pour m'baler, femme balé. T'es pas ici, nous pas carré, bras croisés. Si tous les nous c'est pays, nous pas danger, c'est nos mêmes pendant ni chaud.
Libération en chair. Haïtien, nous casse chaîne pour gagner liberté. Libération en chair. D'être ensemble, d'être oui bien sabio pour l'autre plante qu'à lever. Sinon la maison vie, la bougeonne. Sinon notre maison vie. Ça va pousser, même si c'est coulé, car Anpil patriote, c'est sans fusil, sans bâton, nouvelle liberté. Inspiration en plein en chair, Haïtien, nous casse chaîne pour gagner liberté. Libération en plein en chair, ensemble d'être oui bien sabio pour l'autre la calébrer. Sinon la maison vie la bougeonne. Sinon notre maison vie la va pousser, mais si on pas d'accord, pour nous annoncer, n'a coupé tête pour les cailles pour nous libérer. Si nous coupé tête pour les cailles, n'a pas libéré. Comme nous coupé tête pour les cailles pour nous libérer.
Tout haïtien la one body pour nous dire prier ça, mantra ça chaque midi, chaque minuit pour nous dire à tout cœur. Bon Dieu qui fait soleil, qui éclaire nous en haut, qui soulève la mer, qui fait gronder l'oreille. Bon Dieu, attendez, caché dans un nuage. Là, li gade nous. Li ouais tout sable en fait. Bon Dieu blanc man des crimes. Et pas nous, voulait bien faire. Mais Dieu là qui si bon, ordonnez nous vengeance. Il va guider bras nous. Là-bas nous assistance. J'étais portrait Dieu blanc qui soif de l'eau danger. Coûtez voix liberté qui parle dans le cœur nous. Aïe bobo, aïe bobo, aïe bobo.
Je jure devant Dieu et devant la nation d'en être le gardien intraitable et farouche, qu'il flotte désormais dans l'azur pour rappeler à tous les Haïtiens les prouesses de nos sublimes martyrs, de la crête à Pierrot, de la butte charrière et vertière, qui se sont immortalisés sous les boulets et la mitraille, pour nous créer une patrie où le nègre haïtien se sent réellement souverain et libre.
Bonjour, bon matin, bon jeudi à tous. La première émission ça, elle est faite différemment. Il y a des informations que nous avons besoin qu'on ait. Il y a des bagailles que, il y a des histoires, nous avons besoin de faire recherche. Malheureusement, nous pas qu'à joindre en français. ni en créole, malheureusement, c'est en anglais n'a pas joindre. Donc, moi, désolé, mais moi, trouve que quand même, c'est des histoires qui méritaient pour nous connaître. Là, nous disons bataille, là, nous disons gourmet. Un pays qui fait un noir en pile méchanceté, États-Unis fait noir subi en pile méchanceté. Côté que yo servi avec noir, pour yo arriver côté yo vle rive an, vin fait que, gade histoire. Là, y a pas de Haïti. Haïti, son pays de neige. Normalement, histoire ça yo pas parlé dans l'école en Haïti. Yo pas dit dans l'école en Haïti. Yo pas parlé comment la médecine fait arriver, développer en Haïti. Qui est-ce que te prend comme cobaye? So donc, gon paquet histoire noire qui cachait élève Haïti au pas connaître. Donc, c'est ça qui fait que nous allons partager ça avec nous pour nous au courant. Vers 10h, nous allons parler plus approfondi de ça. Excusez-moi encore, il y a des histoires nous obligés d'entendre en anglais.
Tout ça, on va prendre l'avenir pour Dimitri, on va prendre. Il faut accepter parce que Dimitri, même dit à bouche li, isolant ses amis, c'est crocodile. Si que ça te fait, je ne dis pas, je venais dans la vérité, nous n'avons menti. Quel que l'on soit, c'est les prendre en complot. Zamita ou non complot. Parce que vous faites partie de secteur privé. Il n'y a pas de monde qui a pour nous sortir, non? Je ne dis à nous tous dans l'école, nous lit. Je ne dis à nous tous qui a écrit non, nous faisons élémentaire 1. Grâce à Dieu, nous qui ne doit pas faire philo. Même faire, moi-même, grâce à Dieu, je fais. Il y a l'autre qui pas fait, mais qui fait 6e. 6e secondaire, il y a monde qui fait 9e. Qui est à l'école. L'école des deux. Ok? Qui est à l'école. Si je ne dis pas, ou t'es à protéger les amours fait partie du monde qui est en bas code, ou pas qu'à libre dans le monde. Comment on va le faire libre? Pendant qu'on a sans peuple dans le monde, ou qu'on a manifestation dans le monde, et ça que tu es maintenant, c'est ça qu'il faut te sortir pour te battre Mathias. T'entendez bien, oui? Ou manquer Mathias son calotte. Et c'est Mathias encore, avec partenaire femme non, qui dévoile les bagages combien l'argent gagne dans le monde, qui te bon groupe. Ouais, ou a plaidé, ou a dit que ça que, oh, il a fait diffamation sur vous. Ouais, ou pas jamais parler de 77 millions de gouttes qui étaient dans mon nom. Est-ce que c'est vrai? Est-ce que c'est pas vrai? À qui est-ce que c'est séparé? Pour qui, pourquoi? De qui, de quoi, sans qui, sans quoi? Et pour qui sort un Mercedes boîte dans mon cadeau ça qui cadeau lié? Est-ce que c'est cadeau birthday ou bien est-ce que c'est cadeau travail? Son question à poser. Cadeau internet. Son question à poser. En bilan ça, est-ce que c'est comme ou te bali ou bien c'est comme même pour moun sa aujourd'hui qui permettent que yon peuple dans misère faut te bali? Allô. Troisièmement, qui soyez qui c'est un artiste, ça c'est des faits. Comment on fait faire plaisir moun parti sous nom ou ba au visa? Est-ce que c'est sous pétition? T'adem? Est-ce que c'est consul? Est-ce qu'on fait partie sous pétition? Et si vous pétition à cette époque, est-ce qu'on fait partie sous pétition barricade? Comme on fait? Ça aussi exemple. Cadeau internet. Je ne dis à Anpil.
Tout le monde a souffert, tout le monde a qui prend la rien. Et je dis, nous ça va nous manger jeudi. Depuis nous mangeons les îles, nous sommes maintenant, chaque dimanche, pour artiste sur les là. Nous disons, nous même artistes là, nous avons vu mal artiste mal. Parce que ça est pour mouvement personnel lié. Ça peut que je nous réjouis, les saisines, parce que le peuple n'a pas capable encore. Tout le monde a souffert, mais nous même a souffert. Nous avons vu les îles, nous avons dimanche, nous avons nommé, il y a nommé, tout ça nommé. Nous voulons chercher manger. Nous voulons chercher manger. Mais je dis là, nous comprenons le problème, non. Nous appelons la rue chaque dimanche. Artistes après la rue, après là, jusqu'à ce que nous soyons résidents, nous cherchons. Nous connaissons des soldats qui va fort, des soldats qui va intelligent, des soldats qui va comprendre. Nous avons patience. Nous avons patience et nous avons l'esprit de tolérance. Nous avons barré. Puis nous allons récupérer. Des artistes que c'est normal, l'autre camp a récupéré quelques artistes. Ça qui fait blanc, nous avons récupéré.
Nous gagnons un pays. Il parle dans le sens qu'on est que tout le jeu primaire, c'est le luxe. L'hôpital général Gazé, il y a des nègres. Nous avons un mandat pour défendre nous, pour programmer pour nous. Dès que ça devient malade, le point hélicoptère, il y a l'autre bord, il y a le pays étranger. Moi-même, moi conscient de que
l'État doit nous subventionner l'école à bouffer pour tout le monde. Depuis qu'on a annoncé manifestation, Syrie a séparé, 1000 gouttes a séparé. Il a acheté conscience nous avec 1000 gouttes. Il a acheté conscience nous avec sac tiri plein vert. Mais nous pas ouais demain nous. Nous pas ouais bonheur nous. Je dis il y a Anpil moun qui dit oh arabe, son moun fou, son bandit. Comme si nous bagaille. Pendant nous quitter moun 1000 piastres fait n'a parler arabe mal. Arabe te ka Brésil avec toute famille, maman, madame, petite, tout qui te ka lever la rue. Nous pas besoin ouais qui Philippe. Regardez gros grain bagaille. Aristide manger Tiril. La balance a mangé Tiril. Nous pas jamais pas cacher l'ombre. Et peut-être ça va mettre directeur général yo mettre chef police vle. Je dis à Tiril t'a goumé pour défendre Gonaï. Tiril t'a défendre Gonaï. Tout vrai policier, tout policier honnête.
Mal propre au police de Saint-Ville la radoter son boycottage ça donc ça oui. Ça son boycottage tant que journaliste au moins moun ta dit qu'il y a un mouvement mobilisation qu'a fait sur internet là mais qui est-ce qui en tête li j'aime saute ba mais qui est ou quand pas Diol ou vinn dire comme ça que oh c'est un mouvement boycottage soit on est passé petit cop promoteur petit cop promoteur dans Miami on li get à manger ou équipe grand pour internet nous pas travailler d'internet nous vivre et normal pour faire nous chanter les ou vle et qu'on a quand grain malheur mettre la ville en jeu la parler d'une série de bagailles li get en c'est views a fait qui moun qui pas bon même maman qui Haïti là maman qui Haïti après il m'a parlé de jam saute ba qui est-ce pas qu'on jam saute ba on a parlé caca ça c'est comme ta gaz views là bon mi ka ben qui te views dans monde tout monde te gros views qu'est-ce que views là même comme si yo pas ka comprendre nous même qui ça paye à faire nous depuis tant date où est mort vendre où était radoter nos pays a fait tuer mon en bas pour grand messi comme si yo pas ka comprendre nous même qui ça paye à faire nous tu vas retirer l'application qui fait depuis longtemps moun fait nous commence à l'arriver aux États-Unis pour pas complexer tu vas retirer l'application ça application États-Unis qui installée dans ce boîte tout haïtien tu vas retirer tu vas désinstaller comme si nous étions dans pays malheureusement passer misère dans pays aux États-Unis d'Amérique là tout le monde dans situation qui est difficile nous va dire rien comme si nous étions nous croiser comme si qu'il est dans peuple même les moun là m'k'ap radoter là faut que gouvernement réouvert et démocrate prend trop de temps yo c'est si y a bail pression a bail chalet qui n'a parlé de Haïti même nous saisir les mal propre bail police de Saint-Ville là radoter son boycottage ça donc ça oui ça son boycottage tant qu'on journaliste au moins moun ta dit qu'il y a un mouvement mobilisation qu'a fait sur internet là mais qui est-ce qui en tête li j'aime saute ba mais qui est
Dimitri va parler plus mal que Boulos. Parce que la première question posée Dimitri Vob, c'est sous question la mort Pral. Mais est-ce que nous te connaissons, c'était Dimitri Vob qui a assassiné Pral? Lui-même avec un autre député Pétionville, je ne sais pas non lui, pour ne pas faire marcher, je ne vais pas Bouddha plate, pour ne pas combattre. Et nous avons empoisonné Pral. C'est même genre tout. C'est Dimitri Vob avec André Michel qui finit tuer Maître Doval. Et puis, je ne dis un sous qui est sur la gueule sous Domatine avec Jovenel. Mais où est ça? On est ça tellement grain, n'est ça tellement courage pour sale caractère, mon monsieur.
Jovenel lui-même, monsieur te gagné volonté. Même pas si monsieur pas assez politicien. A fait bailler les politiques là, monsieur pas là dedans du tout. Est-ce que vous comprenez? Moi, je ne suis pas politicien, qui que ce soit. Mais, le pays, ça, pour changement nouveau, les fait, mon cher, et c'est pour moi jouer lié. Parce que, la bataille, la bataille où on est, moun qui en face, ou on a qui est soit bataille, ou on qui côté pour tirer coup de poing. Mais la bataille, ou pas qu'on a qui est soit bataille, même moun qui beaucoup de ou pas qu'à chosio. Est-ce que vous comprenez? Ça veut dire, bon, bref, comme ça, Jovenel son équipe un petit gens naïf, man. J'étais naïf, même j'étais bien volonté. Moi-même, pour te dire franchement, moi, je ne suis pas Jovenel. Je ne suis pas Jovenel pour qui ça? Parce que je me trouvé, je prends trop de temps pour le faire une série de bagages.
This nurse targeted black babies and broke the bones of 7 babies at a NIC unit. The abuse occurred at Henrico Doctors Hospital in Virginia. Over a 2-year period, this nurse was breaking the bones of NIC babies, the most vulnerable. And she only targeted black babies. The reason she was discovered is because a couple had their twins at the hospital. One twin was doing better than the other, which is usually the case. And the one twin that was thriving ended up with a broken leg under this nurse's care. Why did it take 7 children's bones to be broken for someone to sound the alarm? This hospital needs to be held accountable. You know how many parents end up in prison because of nurses like this? Because they get accused of breaking the bones of their infant children? This woman is a monster. To go after the most vulnerable. She was denied bond. But further, I want this woman to be charged with a hate crime because she only went after black babies. How much hate is in you that you're gonna go target infants at a NIC unit who were born prematurely and are fighting for their lives? She deserves life in prison with no possibility of parole.
Everybody needs to be documenting what's happening in Portland, Oregon and sharing it everywhere. TikTok has taken down Portland, Oregon as a location that you can tag. They have taken down the tags, they've taken down the locations. They are actively trying to remove views of videos from Portland. There is a massive resistance going on in Portland right now, and I bet you don't know about it. Thousands of people, I'm not joking. ICE is attacking the police in Portland. The police. ICE is attacking the police. They pepper sprayed the police. They are beating people, they're shooting people, they are spraying them with pepper spray. I want to be absolutely clear about something. ICE is not working with the local police. I have no doubt that the local police have been told to work with ICE, but ICE is attacking them. I repeat, ICE is attacking local law enforcement in Portland, Oregon. TikTok is not showing videos of these things. The location of Portland, Oregon has been removed from TikTok. The tag has been removed from TikTok. Spread the word.
This isn't the Christmas story they teach in schools. Watch till end. Most people think of Christmas as joy, family, and love. But in the 1800s, Christmas in America carried a much darker meaning for enslaved black people. December 25th wasn't a holiday of freedom. It was the busiest day for slave auctions. Plantation owners would gather on Christmas morning, not to celebrate, but to buy and sell human beings. Husbands ripped from wives, mothers torn from children, all while white families laughed, drank, and called it festive. Enslaved people were even branded as gifts, a child given away like a doll, or a man gifted as property. For the enslaved, Christmas wasn't joy, it was terror. Many prayed the holiday would pass without their name being called. Some were forced to dance and sing at plantation parties while knowing their family might be gone by sunrise. That season of giving was a season of taking everything that made them human. So the next time you hear Christmas songs about peace and goodwill, remember this for countless black families. December 25th wasn't a celebration. It was the day their lives were destroyed, wrapped up in a bow of cruelty, and sold to the highest bidder.
Truth unshackled. Did you know major cruise lines turned Haiti into their personal toilet during the pandemic? In 2020, environmental investigators discovered something horrifying. Western cruise companies were dumping millions of gallons of raw sewage directly into Haitian waters. For generations, fishing families had depended on these pristine coastal areas for survival. But cruise executives found a cheaper solution than proper waste disposal. They simply rerouted to Haiti, where environmental laws meant nothing. Within months, dead fish carpeted the beaches. Children developed severe skin rashes and respiratory problems. Internal emails later revealed the shocking truth. Company executives knew exactly what their toxic waste would do to local communities. They calculated that bribing Haitian officials cost far less than following Western environmental standards. The dumping continues today. Entire marine ecosystems remain poisoned while cruise ships operate with complete impunity. Profit over human lives.
Imagine a carnival where the games were black children, stripped, chained, and auctioned. At American fairs, before the rides and bright lights, the main attraction was human suffering. Enslaved children were forced onto stages' mouths, pried open to check their teeth, bodies inspected like livestock. White crowds laughed as terrified little boys and girls were made to sing, dance, or tumble like circus acts. If a child hesitated, they were whipped in front of everyone. Some were tied to posts for discipline demonstrations, their screams drowned out by carnival music. Families were split on the spot, mothers begging in the dirt, while strangers bought their children like souvenirs. These fairs weren't about fun. They were a theater of cruelty. Black children were displayed in cages, forced to race against animals for bets, even dangled from ropes as mock punishments to entertain crowds. Every laugh came at the cost of a child's dignity and life. Even after slavery, the practice didn't fully end. Black children were paraded at fairs and freak shows, mocked, painted, and made into attractions for white amusement. So while today's carnivals sell popcorn and prizes, never forget America once sold black children as the main event.
Because if America wanted to do something about what has been going on in Mississippi, it could have stopped by now. It wouldn't have been in the past few years between 40 and 50 churches bombed and burned. You see, and this lead me to say, all of the burning and bombing that was done to us and the houses, nobody never said too much about that, and nothing was done. But let something be burned, by a black man, and then, my God, you see, the flag is drenched with our blood. Because, you see, so many of our ancestors was killed because we have never accepted slavery. We had to live on it, but we've never wanted it. So we know that this flag is drenched with our blood. So what the young people are saying now, give us a chance to be young men, respected as a man. As we know, this country was built on the black backs of black people across this country. And if we don't have it, you ain't gonna have it either, because we gonna tear it up. That's what they saying. And people ought to understand that. I don't see why they don't understand that. They know what they've done to us. All across this country, they know what they've done to us.
In 1946, Maceo Snipes came home from World War II, a decorated black veteran, a man who fought for freedom overseas. And the first thing he did when he got home to Georgia, he voted. He was the only black person to vote in Taylor County's Democratic primary that year. The next day, a white man knocked on his door and shot him in the back. Snipes didn't die right away. He made it to the hospital, but doctors refused to give him a blood transfusion, claiming the black blood supply was empty. He bled to death, and no one was ever convicted. Maceo Snipes was murdered for doing what every citizen is supposed to do: vote. And while his killing happened in Georgia, its shockwaves hit Alabama veterans hard. Black soldiers across the South realized that if they didn't fight for justice at home, nobody would. Snipes' death helped spark the very movements that would later shake Alabama. His vote cost him everything.
I knew a lady named Miss Mary in North Carolina who was 104 years old, and she told me we were already here. She said, yes, they took people from Africa, but they took them to just mix in with us so they could fool us and take the land by saying we were not here already, that we were African. She said she always knew who she was, and we are indigenous to these lands. Why else did we know the pathways in the Underground Railroad if we didn't already know the land? Miss Mary stated that we are the only group of people who have been reclassified and reclassified and reclassified over time, and she lived through each reclassification in her life's time. They did this to us so they could hide who we really are from us, and they could keep our land. We went from indigenous to copper people to native, Negro, colored, black, now African American. We are the only ones with so many names.
After murdering over 300 black residents, White Tulsa had to hide evidence. They dumped bodies in Arkansas River, buried others in unmarked mass graves, and destroyed medical records of the dead. Save this because you're going to want to see this evidence again. Survivors reported watching trucks loaded with black bodies driving toward river at night. White officials claimed only 36 people died, but funeral home records and survivor testimonies prove hundreds were killed. They threw bodies into Arkansas River weighted down with rocks and chains. Other victims were buried in mass graves outside city limits with no markers or documentation. Hospital records showing black patients treated for gunshot wounds mysteriously disappeared after massacre. Red Cross, which helped with body removal, was ordered to destroy casualty reports and never speak about true death toll. Even today, ground-penetrating radar has found mass grave sites around Tulsa that officials refuse to excavate.
They don't tell you this, but in 1906, the Bronx Zoo put a man in a cage. His name was Ota Benga, a Congolese man who had survived colonization and tragedy. Instead of being treated with dignity, he was displayed in the monkey house beside an orangutan, as if his life was just another exhibit. Newspapers mocked him, crowds jeered, and the city defended it as science. This didn't happen centuries ago. It happened in New York, just over 100 years back. The so-called exhibit was defended by scientists tied to the American Museum of Natural History. Black ministers protested, but the city ignored them. Ota Benga's life was destroyed. The Bronx Zoo never apologized until 2020, more than a century later. Think about that. One of New York's most beloved landmarks carries a history of dehumanization that most people don't know. The truth is, Ota Benga wasn't just caged. He was erased. Follow Forbidden New York. Should places with histories this dark still be celebrated? Or should the city force them to confront their past?
There's a place in America once called the Devil's Half Acre, a place so dark that screams could be heard from the streets above. In Richmond, Virginia, the heart of the slave trade, stood a notorious slave jail owned by Robert Lumpkin. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary building, but inside, it was a hell designed to break human beings. Men, women, and even children were chained in underground cells, sometimes for weeks at a time, with no food, light, or air. Whips tore into flesh until it hung loose, iron collars cut deep into their necks. The stench of blood and waste was so strong that neighbors said they could smell it blocks away. If someone resisted, they were locked in the box, a coffin-like chamber where people slowly suffocated. And still, from this torture house, thousands were sold into slavery. Locals whispered that the ground itself was cursed, and that's why they called it the Devil's Half Acre. But here's the haunting part today. A seminary sits on that very ground. The screams may have faded, but the soil still remembers.
Truth unshackled.
Past the workers of chasing our history. You are inside of a slave breeding house. You're inside of a slave breeding house. I promise you when I tell you this, there are spirits in this place, and you can feel them real heavy. There's a heavy presence of another presence that is not me. And you can clearly feel it. Look at this. They could be as young as 13 years old to lay on this bed, and slaves would sleep with them and produce children. Overseers would sleep with them. The master himself could be sleeping with them. This is a house of horror. This is a house of horror. Everything is original. Look at the stove. Look at the chimney. Look how old it is. You can feel the presence of other entity in here. I've been on enough plantations to know when there's something else in these houses. And clearly, something's in here. There's an unrest in here. Rape happened here. Incest happened here. Molestation happened here. Right here in this slave house. They were breeding them. A 13-year-old could literally, or 12, could literally be laying right here, producing children up to 30.
They called them midwives to cover up the truth. But the first doctors were black women, the first healers, the first surgeons, the first OBGYNs were all black women. Centuries before medicine had a degree, African women stolen and enslaved in America brought with them generations of medical knowledge, knowledge of herbs, surgery,
Paul Lawrence
and childbirth.
Dunbar High School
They healed
in
the
Washington,
enslaved when
D.C.
no one else
was
would.
founded in
They delivered
1870,
babies, even
just
performed
5 years after
C-sections
slavery
with tools
ended.
they made by hand.
And yet within
and here's
one
the part they'll
generation,
never teach you.
this
White
all-black
doctors
public
came to them,
school was
took their
producing
knowledge,
surgeons,
wrote it down,
Ivy League scholars,
claimed it as their own.
military
An
generals,
enslaved
and
woman
federal
named
judges.
Anarcha endured over 30
At a time when
surgeries
black
without
children were
anesthesia.
expected to
Her body
fail,
used to
Dunbar
advance the field of
created excellence
gynecology.
so
But her
undeniable,
name,
it
buried,
scared the system.
her pain, ignored.
Students
So when
were
they
taught
tell you
by black
modern
teachers
medicine
with
was built by
PhDs,
pioneers,
some more
remember it was
qualified
built
than
on the
professors
backs
at
of
white
black women.
universities.
They were the first
These
doctors.
weren't just classrooms.
And erasing them,
They were
that was the
launch
first
pads.
malpractice.
By the 1950s, Dunbar students were outscoring white students across the city and sending 80% of their graduates to college. So what did America do? Did it study this success, fund it, replicate it? No. After desegregation, the system didn't integrate Dunbar's model. It erased it. The school's leadership was gutted. Its top black educators were removed. Resources vanished. Standards collapsed. And just like that, the most successful black public school in U.S. history was dismantled. Not because it failed, but because it succeeded without permission. Black excellence in education wasn't seen as a model to follow. It was seen as a threat to the lie that black children weren't capable. This wasn't desegregation. This was sabotage. Comment, "We are Dunbar if you know this country fears what it can't control, especially when it's brilliant, black, and thriving." White women were too delicate for pain, so they used black women instead. Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy. 3 enslaved women in Alabama, forced to undergo experimental surgeries by Dr. J. Marion Sims, the so-called father of gynecology. Follow the Black South for the truths they kept out of your history books. These women were cut open dozens of times. No anesthesia, no choice, no mercy. Why? Because the world believed black women could endure more pain than white women. When Sims perfected his techniques, he took them to white patients, giving them relief, while the black women who carried his experiments were left scarred and forgotten. Every time a baby is delivered safely today, every time modern gynecology saves a life, it carries the echoes of their suffering. Anarcha, Lucy, Betsy. Their pain was stolen. Their names will not be.
They dumped black bodies in mass graves on Hart Island for over 100 years, and most people don't even know it exists. Follow this page because I uncover black history moments that will make you question everything. Over 1 million people lie buried in trenches, and countless African Americans were thrown into unmarked pits without names. Here's the most sickening part. While wealthy white families built marble monuments in fancy cemeteries, black mothers and veterans got stacked in pine coffins like garbage. Families were banned from visiting their loved ones. Hart Island isn't just a cemetery, it's where New York hid its shame. Poor African Americans disappeared into trenches forever with no headstones or memorials. The city kept this island secret for decades while operating mass graves. This is how systemic racism works. Even in death, African Americans were treated like their lives didn't matter. Comment if you never knew New York operates a secret mass grave island, and follow for the African American stories they tried to bury forever. Hundreds of black men were left to drown locked in cages during Hurricane Katrina. In New Orleans, they were trapped inside Orleans Parish Prison when the floodwaters came. Guards abandoned them. No evacuation, no food, no water. How do you survive when you can't even open the door? Some were still in their cells as water rose to their chests. Others were shackled, sitting in pitch-black filth for days. Many weren't even convicted. They were just awaiting trial. Is that justice or a death sentence? When help finally came, prisoners were marched through floodwater, beaten, and crammed into outdoor cages in the heat. Some disappeared into the system and were never heard from again, or labeled as undiscovered. Over 500 of them. The news barely covered it. Officials buried the story. Why is it so easy to forget the lives that don't fit the narrative? Hurricane Katrina wasn't just a natural disaster. It was a human one. And for those left in those cells, the storm never ended. Hit follow to help this page spread these stories to the masses.
You think slavery was hidden? In Montgomery, Alabama, they sold us in the open, right on Commerce Street. If they won't teach it, we will. Follow. White men turned downtown into a market. They sold black bodies like cotton and corn. Families ripped apart in broad daylight, while crowds gathered like it was theater. Auction blocks stood outside courthouses. Ledger books listed people as property with prices lower than horses. Secondary hook. They didn't just trade us. They built Montgomery's wealth off the chains on our wrists. Banks, railroads, the state capitol itself. Every brick was paid for with suffering. And every politician who swore to serve justice walked past the blood on those streets. Remember this. Montgomery wasn't just a capital city. It was a slave market with a government seal on top.
They were known as the fancy girls of New Orleans, enslaved black women sold not for labor, but for exploitation. Traders marketed their beauty, dressing them in fine clothes and parading them through auction blocks where wealthy white men bid for control of their lives. These women were forced into relationships often promised freedom or social standing in exchange for obedience, but the reality was a life of exploitation and vulnerability. Some were sent to secret brothels, others kept as mistresses in so-called placage arrangements, where power always lay in the hands of their enslavers. Their suffering reveals a darker side of slavery, one where human beings were stripped of dignity and reduced to objects of desire. Though their names are rarely remembered, the story of the fancy girls exposes the cruel intersections of race, gender, and power in America's past. Do you think the stories of the fancy girls should be taught more openly in schools?
If Congress will not check this administration, then Chicago will. Today, we are signing an executive order aimed at reining in this out-of-control administration. The order establishes ICE-free zones. That means that city property and unwilling private businesses will no longer serve as staging grounds for these raids. Our school parking lots are not for ICE to load their weapons. They are for Chicagoans who drop their kids off to learn. Our libraries are not for ICE to prepare for a raid. They're for Chicagoans to read and relax. Our parks are not for ICE to set up checkpoints. They are for Chicagoans to play and enjoy. Private establishments can partner with us to make it clear that private property is private property, and ICE cannot enter establishments without a valid warrant. Private entities may voluntarily choose to display signage to designate their property as part of a citywide network of community spaces that stand together in affirming the safety, dignity, and belonging of all of our residents. By extending this protection beyond city-owned land, the order builds a broad civic shield that limits the reach of harmful enforcement practices. It strengthens neighborhood solidarity, and it reaffirms Chicago's role as a welcoming city.
America has never liked Black Americans. It didn't start in the streets. It didn't start with cops. It started before America even called itself America. When this land was being discovered, Black people were already ripped away from families and sold like tools. From 1619, Black bodies built this country's wealth. And for the next 246 years, we weren't citizens. We weren't people, we were property. In 1776, America declared its independence. The word said all men are created equal. But that didn't include us. For 89 more years, slavery was still legal, and the government didn't just allow it. It protected it. In 1865, slavery ended, but the 13th Amendment left a loophole except as punishment for a crime. So they made new crimes: loitering, vagrancy, being black and free, and used them to lock us up again. Then came Jim Crow, 1877 to 1965, nearly 90 years of segregation, lynchings, and legal oppression. That's almost a century where the law kept us second class. But let's be honest, it never stopped. After Jim Crow came redlining, denying us homes. Denying us, then came the war on drugs, policing mass incarceration. Then came voter ID laws, school zoning, food deserts, health canoe tools. Same goal. So when they say we're lazy, when they say we make excuses, tell them we don't have to. The proof is in the history. White America has never stopped. They've just passed their true feelings down through generation, changing the form, not the goal. And still, we rise.
In 1939, an all-black town called Robbins, Illinois, did something so bold, it threatened the narrative of American power. They built their own damn airport, and not just an airstrip. This was an aviation hub designed and operated by black engineers, black pilots, black ground crew. A self-sustaining flight center run entirely by people who were still being told they couldn't even sit at the front of a bus. The town's mayor, Thomas J. Keller, partnered with Cornelius Coffey, one of the first black aviators in U.S. history, to launch an aviation school and an airport that would train a new generation of black pilots. This was before the Tuskegee Airmen, before integration, before black Americans were allowed to dream this big. They bought the land, cleared the space, built the runway, started flight training. Robbins was about to take off, literally. They had blueprints for expansion, plans for cargo, dreams of commercial routes. It wasn't just a runway, it was a runway out of oppression. And they built it with nothing but grit and vision. But when the federal government found out, they shut it down. No accident, no technical failure, just fear. Fear of black success taking flight on its own terms. The entire story of the Robbins Airport was buried for decades. No textbooks, no monuments, just silence. But make no mistake, they had their own airline, and America made sure you'd never know about it.
Breaking fuck the news. So today in Washington, there was a Washington, D.C. walk. The news ain't even covering this shit. I wonder why. A lot of people out there. Somehow you've been lost in the sauce about the situation going on in Washington. People in Washington are marching against what Donald Trump approved not too long ago. Having the police take over Washington, having the homeless removed, having the stuff just tossed out like it didn't matter. They are marching because they want their city back. They're marching for the freedom and the rights of others. And again, this ain't being televised. This ain't even being advertised. News outlets, where you at? Why is this not being shown to the rest of the world?
They wouldn't let us ride freely on their trains, so we built our own. In 1916, black men in Georgia founded the Savannah Valley Railroad Company, the first black-owned and operated railroad in the South. While Jim Crow laws tried to keep us in the back, these men laid down their own steel and put black engineers, conductors, and investors at the front. This wasn't just about transportation. It was about freedom. Freedom to move, to trade, to connect black towns that had been cut off by design. Here's the part they don't teach. White-controlled railroads often bypassed black communities entirely. It was a form of economic strangulation. If no goods could get in or out, towns couldn't grow. Savannah Valley flipped that script. Their goal? A black supply chain powered by black labor, black money, and black vision. How many black businesses do you know that ran a railroad? This story proves what we could build when the system shut us out. And it's not ancient history. The railroad operated for years and inspired others. So tell me this. If they could build a railroad in 1916, what's stopping us now? Follow Black South to reclaim more stories they never taught us.
There's a cemetery inside the Bronx Zoo. Thousands are buried there, and almost no one knows. Before the zoo was built, the land was home to the West Farm Cemetery, a burial ground dating back to the 1800s. It held the remains of enslaved Africans, poor immigrants, and some from nearby institutions. When the Bronx Zoo opened in 1899, the graves weren't moved. They were paved over. In the 1950s, when expansion began, workers uncovered bones, but instead of preserving them, many were quietly reburied in mass graves or discarded. Today, visitors walk the zoo paths unaware they're stepping over forgotten lives. The official records? Fragmented, incomplete, and often hidden. Community groups have pushed for memorials, but the story has been largely ignored by city officials. The truth is simple. Progress in New York often meant erasure, and cemeteries like this became collateral damage. The Bronx Zoo isn't just an attraction. It's built on top of New Yorkers who were erased from history. Should the city mark and honor every burial ground it covered up? Drop your thoughts, tag a friend from the Bronx, and follow Forbidden New York.
The FBI killed 28 Black Panthers. Here's the list between 1968 and 1971. The FBI assassinated 28 Black Panther leaders. Not arrested, assassinated. Fred Hampton, 21, shot while sleeping. Mark Clark, 22, same bed. Bunchy Carter, 26, UCLA. John Huggins, 23, UCLA. The FBI calls them justifiable homicides. Follow for the COINTELPRO murder files they released in 2021. Your local news called them shootouts. FBI files reveal no return fire in 90% of cases. Hampton's apartment, 99 bullets in, 1 out. That one. Reflexive trigger pull after Mark Clark died. FBI drugged Hampton, provided floor plan. Chicago police executed, FBI coordinated. Bobby Hutton, 17, shot with hands up. Alprentice Carter, 26, shot in tunnel with no escape. FBI memo, neutralize Black Panther Party leadership. Neutralize meant murder. They weren't killed for violence. They ran free breakfast programs, health clinics, Hampton united poor whites, Latinos, and blacks. FBI memo, greatest threat to internal security. 3 weeks later, dead. The FBI agents who planned these murders? Promoted, retired with honors. The families? No justice, no compensation. Your government didn't infiltrate the Black Panthers. They executed them. Your newspaper called it law and order.
This is extremely important information for the black community. Recently, Trump the Chump brought back McCarthyism to U.S. politics. McCarthyism is a ferocious campaign against alleged communists in the U.S. government and other institutions carried out under Senator Joseph McCarthy between 1950 and 1954. Many of the accused were blacklisted, lost their jobs, or put on trial for murders they did not commit, like Angela Davis. And most of the people this government terrorized did not in fact belong to the Communist Party. But now, instead of targeting communists, they will now be targeting anyone who's not MAGA. It sounds like a bad joke, but it's not. This new executive order, released September 25th, is already making waves across the political spectrum. It's called the National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, or NSPM-7. And on the surface, it's about fighting domestic terrorism. But that's just a smokescreen. If you dig deeper, which of course I did, you'll find that it's a minefield of vague language, subjective motivations, and power plays that could reshape how dissent, specifically black political dissent, is treated in this racist regime called the Trump the Chumps administration. NSPM-7 is framed as a response to what the president calls an epidemic of political violence, from assassinations to riots to attacks on ICE facilities. The order positions this violence as coordinated, strategic, and ideologically driven, particularly by so-called anti-fascist movements. In response, the memorandum empowers the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force to coordinate a sweeping investigation and disruption strategy targeting networks, entities, and organizations accused of supporting or organizing political violence. That includes U.S.-based groups, individuals, and even NGOs, nonprofit organizations, and citizens abroad. Here's where things get complicated. NSPM-7 doesn't just go after acts of violence. It targets ideologies, specifically any movement or organization that critiques what the administration frames as foundational American principles. I am not making this up. And I quote, "Common threads animating this violent conduct include anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, and extremism on migration, race, and gender." Now ask yourself, what does extremism on race and gender mean? Or hostility towards this so-called traditional American values? These are not legal definitions, people. They're cultural dog whistles. And in the hands of federal agencies, those subjective interpretations can have real devastating consequences for all of us. Now, what will this mean for this order's main target? And its main target is, you guessed it, black organizations. Historically, whenever black people organize for justice, whether it's the Black Panthers in the 60s or Black Lives Matter in the 2010s, the state has labeled us a threat. COINTELPRO ringing any bells? Under NSPM-7, if a black organization supports abolitionist policies, criticizes capitalism, or demands radical reform to police and immigration systems, they could be labeled as part of a domestic terrorist network, even if they've never committed or encouraged a single act of violence. It's almost as if they're trying to scare us into submission, into silence. And that would be funny if I wasn't so tired of all these idiot cowards. They're like those guys in high school that always wanted to be popular, but nobody liked them because they were creepy. That's who Stephen Miller is. That's who Trump the Chump is. All of this chaos that they've created is because nobody likes them. This order explicitly names anti-fascist movements as the ideological backbone of modern domestic terrorism. But who gets to define what's anti-fascist? The administration? The DOJ? And what if your group just happens to criticize ICE or protest a courthouse or, God forbid, fundraisers for people arrested during demonstrations? That might now be enough to warrant surveillance, financial investigation, or worse. NSPM-7 doesn't stop at investigation and arrest. It gives the Treasury Department and IRS broad authority to track, audit, and disrupt the funding of so-called domestic terror groups. That includes revoking tax-exempt status, freezing assets, and even prosecuting employees of nonprofits. And this also invokes the 9/11 policies. So they won't even need a warrant to start tapping your phones. Now think about how many small black-led nonprofits are already operating under intense scrutiny, struggling for resources. One flag donation, one protest photo on Instagram, and suddenly you're accused of supporting political violence. This kind of financial warfare could decimate grassroots movements that have never been tied to criminal activity. NSPM-7 reads less like a counterterrorism directive and more like a political loyalty test. If you don't agree with the administration's stance on immigration, policing, race, religion, or gender, you may now be viewed as a national security threat. So what happens when the government uses the domestic terrorist label to silence their opposition, to stop protests, to scare people from organizing in their communities? You don't need a conspiracy theory to see where this could go, where this is going. We've already been there. So where does that leave us? First, you must know your rights. We have a Know Your Rights checklist on our website. If approached by law enforcement of any kind, and if you're organizing, fundraising, or educating, stay legal, stay transparent, and document everything. Second, demand oversight. Congress must do their job and step in and ensure that NSPM 7 isn't used to target peaceful dissent. And third, be like me and don't stop speaking out no matter what. This executive order is designed to scare movements into silence. But this isn't a movement. This is a revolution for Black unity and equality. But the only way to protect our civil liberties is to exercise them. So share this video with anyone you think needs the info. I also have a link to the full executive order as well, so you can read it for yourself. If you have any questions, just put them in the comments section.